Hi, I'm Brenna. This is Lisa. We'll be talking about our threat modeling journey and some milestones that we hope you will find interesting. So a quick overview of the agenda. We'll introduce ourselves. We'll talk a little bit about why we started threat modeling, a little bit beyond the obvious reasons, since everyone here knows the obvious reasons. We'll talk about kind of the program itself, the team, and some iterations that we went through and where we're trying to go. And then we'll do some lessons learned and Q&A. So a little bit about me. I am a software security principal at Navy Federal Credit Union, but prior I was the head of product security at SAS Institute, where Lisa also works.
Yep. And I'm a product security lead in my role. My title is an AppSec architect at SAS. I focus on our fraud and anti-money laundering solutions, but work across the division.
And she actually just became a senior AppSec architect, so please give her a hand.
2 days ago.
Yeah, she's amazing. So by the way, this presentation, we only have 30 minutes, but we have a lot more content than that. So if you have questions after this that we don't get to, please feel free to add us on LinkedIn or ask us while you're here, and we'll be happy to oblige. So the journey begins. This is Lego themed. Some of you like Legos, I heard. So the business says, get this done, we will. So they have, for context, they want to get FedRAMP. So they have a lot of requirements they need to meet, but really they want to sell to the market a highly regulated one. Legal is concerned that maybe we're not compliant with all those things. There's a gap analysis. We need to meet the gap, and we need to do better with secure design. So they want threat modeling artifacts in the practice. Security really cares about, are we more vulnerable? And development just wants to know if they have to learn more security tools and more compliance processes. Got a lot of needs and a lot of people to try to make happy with a threat modeling program and a practice. But what the security team has to decide is, are we gonna be the compliance enforcers? Are we gonna be the bad cops? And are we gonna just be concerned about checking the box for compliance, taking a controls-focused approach, and just making sure that we get the audit traceability that's needed to be the arm of legal and compliance on this? Or are we worried more about security, enhancing the practice, slightly less concerned about the results that we get right now as much as we are about making sure we're baking into the process, being iterative over time, and being a good partner to development, and helping get a better understanding of the security postures of our projects. So the actual trajectory of this starts with the checklist. So it was a process that was trying to get that audit traceability. The product was a picture of the whiteboarding exercise that the teams would do of threat modeling, and a ticket saying that they did threat modeling and a picture of what they did. And then there was only one AppSec person at the time who was kind of the lead on going out to consult with these teams and teach them through it. So we got to check the compliance box, but there weren't a lot of like documented action items and kind of results and work coming out of that. So then we had the hero threat modeler came back and tried to climb the mountain of making a security design review that was a security architecture of the new platform and a migration that we were doing. But it was really slow, and it took pretty much over a year to actually get the full design, and it burned him out pretty bad. So we tried to teach the whole security team to start doing these secure design reviews, because the first threat models that the teams were doing weren't getting any results, and the second one, where we just had one person who knew how to do it, wasn't working so well. But it was really like a Band-Aid over the worst critical control areas that we knew were weak. But the benefits were, we started kind of breaking those into components. It was still slow, but it went from a year and some change down to like 4 to 6 months. And the benefits were, it started to seed a process that could then be adopted by more people. So, introducing the Justice League. For those of you who have not heard anything about product security leads programs, we the two of us separately have a couple of different talks about it. But basically, it was an augmentation of our Security Champions program where we made an extension of our product security office that reported into the lines of business. And the product security leads serve as a liaison between the centralized product security office and security champions that are embedded within each of those divisions. So
Okay.
that being said, I will pass over to Lisa to tell you about how the product security leads helped drive security design reviews.
And so, as where the Justice League comes from, we product security leads, it's a team of 10 of us, were distributed across the Institute. Most of us had never met, and all of a sudden we are a team, but we were all matrixed. We, dotted line to product security office, but we had our other bosses. So we created a side chat called Just Us, and then after we survived Log4j, we made it the Just Us League, so that became the running joke. So I have to credit my colleague Eric Short for that one. But as product security leads, I can't read that. So one of the first things that I did in my product security lead program, that's what we're missing. So Brenna became the last person remaining in our product security office after about a 6-week mass exodus. And this is part of why she rebuilt the product security lead program, or built that. That left us with that loss of connection, so we had to restart the building of relationships. So we have a secure design review program, and when Brenna first asked me about doing this, I'm like, we don't really do threat models that well. We don't have that many of them on the new platform. And then when we started talking about the secure design review process, the way we do it, it's threat modeling. It's very heavy, it's very stretched out, but it is. So how is it driven? When we start with the secure design review process, you have to know what you're building. Sounds familiar. Our product owners know that. Like I said, I work in fraud and anti-money laundering. I live and breathe PCI DSS and other types of sensitive data. Those requirements that are going to come from security, my product managers are going to know about. Then R&D management, instead of they've been told what they have to build, they decide how to build it. So the management is going to know the architectural pieces, how their product is going to fit into the larger cloud-based platform. The dev managers, or the actual dev team and the leads, they're dealing with tooling. They are expert at the tools themselves that are in their CI/CD process. They are responsible for secure coding. And test leads, and I came to this from a long time in testing, I love breaking things. The testers bring the perspective of, okay, here's your use case, but how can I break it? And if you've got heavy duty RBAC or regulatory things, they can bring in your abuse and your misuse cases. In our world, they're also who runs the DAST and IAS tools. As we've moved into CI/CD, more cloud stuff, the DevOps piece and the configuration management piece has become ever more important. Product builds product. They say what their default configurations are, but when you get a large, complex, layered thing in, are those secure defaults still there? And so the maintaining that secure configuration and how we can evaluate that is part of DevOps. Where the security specialists come in is that we know security. We know more about the threat landscape. So here's your product, but here are actual active exploits that we're aware of. Here are CVEs that because of your tool choices may be affecting you. Now what we build, so we're going to look at the anatomy of an SDR, how we put one together, we start with what are we trying to build? So we get a product overview. We find out what the functional and non-functional requirements are and because of that, what security requirements come into it. Then we draw a picture. We have to have the diagram. We use lucid charts. One of the smart things that we did was we got a template. We agreed this is the shape we use for a Java microservice. This is the shape we use for Go, because it created a visual vocabulary. So if you move across the diagrams, it was a way that we could talk about things. And then once we've built what's there and what's connecting, then we do our data flow diagrams. So what data is flowing to where, and for each type of data, we do call-outs. What kind of sensitivity is it? What protections are in place for it? So those call-outs are on that diagram. And that is going to drive part of our threat model. Then we start looking at some of the technical analysis. What ports and protocols have you got underneath? What configuration settings do you have out of the box? And then I draw my threat model. We use the Microsoft threat modeling tool. It's challenging in a lot of ways, but we took the existing Azure template and added stencils and pieces and set properties based on how we build things. So that helped us cut, in one case, changing to the custom template let me go from 400 threats to 200 and cut out a lot of the noise, to your point earlier. But then where the money comes in is at the end of it. So when we've gone through the whole process and we've identified the risks, we have to have the recommendations. One of the core deliverables of the secure design review is those risks and recommendations, and they get tracked in the systems. We do a turnover to the teams at the end, and it includes obviously dev management, but also the product owners, also testers, so they know what test cases they want to build into things. So as I said, when Brenna asked me, I was like, how is our secure design review process threat modeling? Well, what do we want to accomplish? That's that product decomposition that we're doing. What are the inherent security and compliance requirements based on the market of this product? And then visualization. We do the architecture diagram. Sometimes sequence diagrams are helpful. So that helps us to visualize what we're doing. Dealing with an international set of stakeholders, that visual piece helps us communicate and talk to that. And then classic threat modeling, what can go wrong? We do the threat model, we look at our security scans, we look at pen test findings, and I go out and dig through security or tech support tickets and ask, what of our customers support, or what are they questioning, or what's been reported? So what are some known issues that I can drive back in? And then mitigation, what are we going to do about it? And that is where the risk identification comes in, classifying it by type, because one of the things I've been watching for is, are there trends across these industry solutions where we're weak, and is that a training opportunity? And then validation, did we do a good job? This is one of the weakest points I've seen in some programs is, you've got your issues, but are you going back at some interval to see, did we take that recommendation on board? Have we closed that loop? So we had 6 things. So 1 and 2 was, I guess, 3 years ago. So this was 2 years ago. When we started out with the secure design review, we were thinking everything was all the same. It's like, this is what it is. We quickly realized they weren't all the same, because a product secure design review was a radically different challenge than an architecture one, right? Because the requirements are different, who's going to work on it's different, how much time it's going to take is different. So we had to readjust the sizing. And in that year, the security office itself was primarily the review board. It was we roughly did 1 per PSL per quarter, and got through about a quarter of our shipping portfolio on the new platform. The next year, it's like, okay, how can we do this differently? And, sorry, I have to scroll this. I can't see it. So how we went from, in the next 2 years, we started out trying to do everything. We didn't have enough people. We have about 3,000 direct R&D engineers that 10 PSLs support. There's 1 champion in each of the teams, but that's still, we didn't have enough bodies to do the work that needed to be done. So we backed up and said, okay, let's do a risk-based methodology and figure out which things deserve a secure design review, what things need a threat model. And we did that by asking some of the questions that I've heard asked in sessions this morning. And then that enabled us to shift from the platform, the heavy stuff, to more of the lighter weight solutions. What's happened as a result is we've moved from being these pesky people who inserted ourselves in the middle of a release cycle to being asked to come in, right? And it's like, oh, I've got this new feature. I know it's going to have these security things. Can you come and help me? So we've gone to proactive engagement. We talk about building security culture. This has been one of the ways that we've been able to do that. So on our journey to scale, we went from the hero to the League of Champions. So looking at some of the lessons that we've learned, the PSL program, because we were embedded in divisions, we had established relationships. Some of us were testers, some of us were developers, we have a tech writer. Those existing relationships and partnerships helped us go from being the bad cop to being people who were brought in. And then the journey continues. Where are we going from now? It's funny because Barbara here started our threat modeling program sometime before with the older platform. And we were talking last night and I realized, oh, where I want to take it is exactly where it was. We want to go from security office doing the threat models to getting that done by the teams. They know the product well. And so we would go to be advisors as opposed to being deliverers. So that's an essential piece.
So we really couldn't skip straight from, we have a compliance-driven model, people are whiteboarding the diagram, we're just ticketing that they did threat modeling, which really wasn't driving the results back into the product. We had to get the security team to come back in to make a roadmap that basically looked at the platform and the solutions from a higher level. Where are the critical control areas that we need to prioritize by risk? We need to start road mapping it and working it that way. We need consistency. We need a visual language that we design and we own through Lucidchart, through the architecture diagrams. Consistency in the ticketing models as far as what are the outputs of the threat model? How are we reporting on that? How are we showing metrics? How are we showing that the time that we are spending on the threat models is actually providing value to the business, lowering mean time to resolution, preventing things from making it out the door? What can we grow from to give this back to pen testing teams, to take it more, here's the white box, like we need to show you what you can test to validate, did we make the right decisions, did we find the right things, and did we fix it? Or are we just kind of creating threat models that have no value and are not giving us anything that we can use? So that said, we have a couple minutes, we do have a couple more slides that have some more lessons learned in metrics, but I wanted to make sure that if anybody has questions, we have some time for discussion.
Hey, thanks for the talk. So you guys are using Lucidchart, and I appreciate the like the standard stencil I think you guys put in place. Have you ever thought of making up your own integration with Lucidchart so that you can bring more, including security metadata to your shapes, and kind of maybe getting more data-driven through Lucidchart and keeping that maybe dealing away from the Microsoft tool and keeping the adoption just on Lucidchart and just tuning Lucidchart to your own tool as well?
So the original decision was made because we had some access to Lucidchart licenses, but we didn't have enough to quite go around to like scale out to all the teams using Lucidcharts. We were also starting from the architecture team isn't making any diagrams, the team aren't making any diagrams, so we have nothing as the security team to start from, other than old whiteboard sketches of varying quality and comprehension. So just coming up with that to begin with was a project in itself, because we had to collaborate with, well, we didn't have to, but we chose to, collaborate with the design team and also our global education and learning team, who did have some diagrams for the solutions that they were doing training on, the blogs they were doing in the implementation teams. So we took that feedback and kind of collaborated to make sure we were creating a methodology that could be understood by components, could be made consistent by the teams. As far as the Microsoft threat modeling tool goes, that is hard because, as most people who have run a program in this room know, you have to make some choices to balance where and when you can put budget into third-party tools, open source tools, and how you can manage that. I do like, I know this is tooling agnostic, but I like that Arius Risk is talking about using that open threat modeling tool format to then be able to at least plug and play it, because part of the problem with tooling selection is you don't want to like hitch your cart to one horse that might age and die, and then you have to get another horse, but all of your tack only fits that horse. I used to ride horses. Anyway, so that's pretty much where we come from as far as the tooling goes. The benefit being starting to make those architecture diagrams is filling in the picture of what the portfolio looks like at a system level. It's starting to create the vocabulary that teams are learning based on, so they can refer back to their threat model, whether or not it's included in the compliance angle, I would argue that it's furthering the security journey model because they understand the purpose of the threat modeling. They're starting to incorporate the vocabulary. They're looking at their diagrams even when we're not in the room because we helped them make it, and they're referring back to the things that they learned. Now, will they get into the tooling themselves eventually? That is kind of like the end vision of getting it back to the teams. But there was a lot of groundwork and foundational work that had to be set before that because meanwhile, we were doing a role-based training program. So now they've all had like better application security training. They've had exposure to threat modeling and also other parts of the life cycle that maybe they didn't envision because they were just stuck in their own jobs. So they're getting better at threat modeling incrementally.
Yeah.
And then the product security leads are training the security champions to be able to later lead that for their teams. But the end goal is the framework exists, the consistency exists, the tooling and the process exist. So when the teams get back to it, it'll be at the right level for them to be able to participate, but actually still getting the results. Does that make sense?
One thing I will say about the charts is that once we had all the foundational pieces, solutions, which is a lot of where the industry work is, could layer on top of it. And then you had in the callouts things that the solution got for free, but if they aren't using this piece, they've got their own their own flavors of database because of finances or whatever, then they have to add those pieces in. 5 seconds after I finished my last diagram, I got a request from product management. I got a request from somebody else who wanted to use it. So we did get to a point, because some of the dev teams hadn't been creating their diagrams, that we had one version of the truth. The hard part was controlling it. But so we were very careful about data classification, that kind of thing when it went out. But it was a way of getting everybody looking at this platform and their piece of it in the same way. Other?
So depending on the talk, we've either heard of like grassroots modality, top-down approach that's more checkbox driven. Then there's always that wonderful cold center that has to kind of come to fruition, and that's where we build a lot of our security champion programs. Coming out of the different methodologies that you had to come across, what was like your critical mass or inflection point that moves it away from either grassroots or top down and really starts to thaw that cold middle that says, hey, we have buy-in and we want to see this happen?
So I would say the product security leads were really the part that made that happen, because what we had when we started the program, well, it's just me, but also we had a bunch of security champions who they existed and had some training and were doing things on the team, but there was not a good line of communication. And also because all of the different teams and the lines of business had flexibility in their release cycles and what cloud they were on and what code they were using, they would tune out when you would try to just talk to them generally about security. But then in a small central team, you can't customize the conversation to every security champion and every team. So the product security leads were kind of the bridge between, you got the security champions on every team, so that's kind of the grassroots level. You have the top-down buy-in because they had to give me headcount for the product security leads. So you got about 10 or 11 of those. And then they're working, quote unquote, for the teams and for the divisions, but almost as undercover agents because they're driving the product security, the product security program priorities and initiatives. So it's kind of like a little of both, which is why we started trying to do it the grassroots way, but just doing it with the carrot instead of the stick wasn't working. So then you get the stick being compliance tells you have to do this and leadership tells you have to do it, but there's not a lot of comprehension, engagement, or buy-in from the teams. So then you try to find a way back to that because it's gonna work best when the teams own it, but if you can't get a strong enough relationship and line of communication because there's not enough security team to go around to everyone who would like to talk to us. So how do you scale that and amplify it while still having enough time to actually write the strategies, write the things that are gonna help you get the results that you need and get the teams to understand how to decompose it and apply it in their own context.
To that, I would add that the product security leads, because they know the business of their division, were trusted brokers, and we changed the direction of the conversation. Here is the thou shalt policy, here is the new procedure, we went, that isn't going to work for us because this is how we do this thing. And it became a dialogue. And when I saw teams see that the direction of conversation changed, they were much more willing to come on board because they felt like they were being heard. So I think that was core to thawing the middle.
I have a question. Great presentation and fun pictures on the slides. Can you comment on who are the best people to involve in as part of the review board? Are these the same people who are driving the threat modeling practice, product security lead? How do you think this should, review board should be scaled to the whole organization?
So that's really interesting because I've always been a strong believer in that the center of excellence model does not work. As in, you burn out the people who are trying to be the approval board or the authority figures of the thing. However, how are you going to enforce quality without just having a bunch of JPEGs of whiteboards? Not that I experienced that. But when in the COE model that we first tried with the Justice League, the point was teach them to fish so that eventually you can hand over the ownership of that to them, and then they can scale it out kind of again to the security champions. So they've got to be able to lean on the central security team and the security experts at first, both learning how to do security architecture diagrams, learning how to do the technical analysis, getting support when they need through Stride pretty much, and the risks analysis and recommendations. So they need someone to do it. The most impactful thing, though, was that after that initial COE model, so these standouts, including Lisa, of product security leads who were able to do really good security architecture diagrams, were then able to take a larger step in the leadership role to own the process analysis and improvement, which she's been working on, but also to then start implementing peer reviews. So peer reviews were a key step of scaling and ensuring quality, because for each secure design review, there has to be basically 3+1s. As in peer reviews, they have to read the secure design review, they look at the diagrams and the threat models, and they do the Q&A in a wiki page. And then that person who owns the document has to go back, revise according to the Q&A, answer the questions, which is also documented, and that improves it, but also every single person that peer reviews it gets access and exposure to a technology that they might not have because it wasn't in their line of business. So they learned something new, and it improves them incrementally by editing and asking those questions. Then, after those are incorporated, the security architect approver goes through and at least makes sure everything is in place. There are no glaring errors, that things actually have been sort of debriefed to the development team, and that those things have been put in the backlog or in a risk register or are somehow now trackable and traceable, so that then you can call that version of the threat model and secure design review complete and revisit it next time. Great question.
Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question if anybody has it. No? So thank you very much, Brenna, Lisa.
Thank you.
Very interesting talk. And we'll continue in about 10 minutes with the next one.